Sometimes we can be very fixed, this is the right way, I want to do it this way. And actually it's about recognising there are other ways to do it. It's okay to get it wrong, because we're always learning all the time, no matter how much experience you've got, and I've got nearly 20 years experience in inner city London, but I recognised that actually my approach wasn't quite right actually. It had some success, but I think not as much as it's going to have now. I was a little bit unsure about the programme, didn't know much about it, but the head teacher, Miss Baker, said to me, look, I think it's a really good thing for you to go on. Our exclusions are too high at the moment, despite us doing lots of great work with behaviour in the school. So I thought, okay, yep, let's give it a go. Came in with an open mind. I came on this course and actually it's made me really rethink how we're doing things. I think lots of behaviour inset you go on is quite woolly, and you have to make sure you get the policy right, and then if the policy's right, and you can follow through with that policy and get that policy sort of consistently applied across the school, then you can really see impacts. And we're seeing that already in my school, which is great.
And it just chimed with our thinking and an area that I really knew we needed to develop in, but that I felt incredibly uninformed about. My route through has always been teaching, learning, pedagogy, and I'm passionate about that. I felt very under-equipped for being able to lead actually on this other area that I think was becoming increasingly apparent that we really needed to be thinking about much more carefully than we were.
Obviously you've got the expert input, that is all very much research informed, which I think is vital. But I think for me it is about collaboration. It's the ability to talk to colleagues, both the mainstream setting, but I think also the alternative setting. It's really interesting as to that relationship. I think historically it may have been, well actually the mainstream setting work in a particular way, and PRUs, it's a bit of a dark art, it's a bit of a black box that nobody really delves into. But the more I've spoken to the colleagues who lead the alternative provisions and are part of that leadership team, actually I'm learning as much, if not more so, from how they operate. And it's actually opened up my eyes to how alternative provisions have significantly moved forward in their pedagogical approaches around teaching and learning, around expectations, whilst having that trauma-informed approach.
It makes you think about individual cases, and obviously we're all in education to get the best out of our young people, and it is a personal thing. You really care for these people, these kids. You want them to succeed. And when you're aware of what they're going through in their personal lives, how poverty affects them, how different challenges about domestic violence, drug abuse, all of these things that are going on daily in their lives. It's remarkable they're doing as well as they are, and that they are so resilient. But it's absolutely crucial that we are, we're aware of that, and we support them through that in the right possible way, crucially without lowering our expectations of them, because we know that getting through school, getting good, results, potentially, or whatever it is you want to do, can change their lives and get the outcomes they want, so that the cycle, hopefully, is broken.
We've always badged ourselves as an inclusive school. We have high numbers of pupils with EHC plans, all that sort of thing, but actually, I'm not sure we were practicing inclusion in its very broadest sense, that there were pupils who weren't finishing their time at Morpeth. And I think I probably hadn't really stepped back and reflected on that as much as I should have done. And I should have felt much more accountable for those students than I did. And actually, examining what we were doing in a meaningful way is hard. And actually, we needed some support for doing that. And it seemed to me that the difference this programme could offer us some of that thinking and training and strategic thinking as well that would be really useful.
I think coming into this course it was much more than just thinking about changing a few policies or tweaking a few routines. It was very much about our vision and a complete culture change really in the way that we work with young people, especially our most vulnerable young people. And I think having an environment where you can talk quite openly about what works well, what doesn't work well, the things that you've got wrong along the way, and do that in a way that hasn't felt that you've been judged or that there's a right or a wrong way to do it. I think that's been really helpful for me.
I think coming from a school that prides itself in its trauma-informed approach and its universal use of restorative justice, I had jumped to conclusions as to the level of knowledge and skill that colleagues who have been there a number of years had. And I think what it's raised my eyes, opened my eyes to, is the fact that practices, ethoses, systems erode over time. And it is vitally important that we're continually resetting, refreshing and reviewing and bringing all colleagues along with us on that journey. So it's ensured that that little and often model of CPD that's keeping that trauma-informed approach alive, making sure it's actually applicable to everyday classroom practice with all adults, and ensuring we're constantly adapting the approach to ensure it's best for our school and each cohort as it comes in year on year.
We had the inclusion framework. That was one of our assignments. I think it was one of our first assignments, if I'm not mistaken. And that is something that I actually took back to senior leadership team. And as a team, it kind of shaped our thinking about where we are as a school, where the tiers are for our pupils, and what is it that we are doing as a school to stop escalating pupils from moving from one tier to the other.
One of the assignments we were looking at was like a reflective journal, looking at an incident we'd had or had occurred over the course of our days teaching or days working with students, and it was really useful for me to actually think about and reflect in detail what my feelings were when I was dealing with a particular student. So this was a student who was demonstrating some really challenging behaviours, was sort of pushing our boundaries as an institution really far, and we were struggling to understand how we can best support this individual. And by formally doing that on like a piece of paper and working through it has then allowed me in my everyday role or life to embed that. So now I'm far more reflective and think about actually, was that the best way to approach that with an individual student? And from doing that, I can then educate and talk to other members of staff about how they best might want to deal with those things. So it's maybe a better Senko.
It's quite easy to get stuck in the sort of work around following routines and policy to the T, but actually letting go of that a little bit and focusing on the relationship rather than what steps you've followed, I think will be quite exciting and quite liberating for some staff. So I'd like to see more of that, and I think the big thing that I want to roll out within the next maybe 6 months for the rest of this academic year is working on building restorative practice more into what we do every day.
One of the best sessions was trauma-informed practice. I think that really resonated with me, being in such a difficult setting. I recognised lots of those behaviours in our young people. And we've got, you know, a sort of tiered approach, and eventually, as you go up the tiers, eventually, you know, it really results in fixed term exclusions. And we've looked at that, and we've actually, you know, rewritten the policy so it's not as, you know, I guess not as black and white. I mean, you know, I think that sometimes with policy, particularly around partial issues, it's too black or white, and then that can mean that students escalate up through the system far too quickly. So we've looked at that, and we've, you know, it's more of a sort of bespoke approach. We've had to do some training with staff on this because obviously, you know, staff very much want to see behaviour dealt with, and, you know, as a leadership team we need to support that, of course. But, you know, I delivered a trauma-informed practice session with the staff. It went down really, really well, and they're really buying into it. And actually, you know, in our first term this year, we've managed to reduce exclusions significantly. So September to Christmas last year, compared to this year, we're a quarter of the number of fixed term exclusions.
So in terms of the impact that the programme has had for us, things have started feeding back into school fairly quickly. Staff were overwhelmingly positive about that training and how it impacted on their way of working with pupils.
It's about the fact that I think classrooms are calmer. Attendance for some of those pupils has really improved because they want to be in the base in the morning.
And I suppose the dream for me at the moment is to be a model of good practice within our local area, and to be able to go out and work with other schools and academies on what they deliver and how I can support them to do that even better.
No matter what level you are as a senior leader, you know, I think it's a great course. I was someone who's a bit like, well, really, I've done lots of sort of training on behaviour, and it's very, very different. It's something you can take away, it's something you can use, it's something very practical that you can actually apply in schools, and actually the network that you create allows you to share and pick up excellent practice going on in other schools that you may not have.